Welcome to IVF This, Episode 22, Questioning Your Faith with Melanie Dale. Welcome to IVF This. I'm your host, Emily Ginn. I'm a mother to two beautiful and feral boys. I'm married to my favorite person in the world. I'm a social worker, a life coach, and an IVF warrior. I'm here to teach you how to manage your mind and emotions during your IVF journey, to break free from anxiety and regain control of your life, even in the midst of infertility. I'm going to teach you to say IVF this to how we think about, talk about, and experience infertility. Let's go. Hello, my friends. So excited to bring this episode to you, not just because today is the Monday that marks the start of National Infertility Awareness Week, which is an amazing week where we all get to celebrate and advocate and really just create a lot of awareness around something that affects millions of people around the world. But also because I think regardless of your faith traditions, your faith beliefs, having some, not having any, I think this is kind of a universal experience that most of us have when we're going through infertility, and questioning your faith, as Melanie and I kind of unpack in this episode, is a very normal, very expected course, and that there's nothing wrong with it. So that was the reason, that was the motivation behind creating this episode. So if you're not familiar with Melanie Dale, she is an author of 4 books, including In Freaking Fertility, How to Survive When Getting Pregnant Gets Hard. It's a must read if you haven't read it. She's a very lighthearted author. My personal favorite from her is It's Not Fair, but she is a wonderful writer. She's also a staff writer for Coffee and Crumbs, hosts the podcast Lighten Up with Melanie Dale, and has contributed writing to everything from the Encourage Devotional Bible to Shudder's Creepshow. She lives in the Atlanta area with her husband of 20 years and their 3 children from 3 different continents. She's experienced infertility, IVF, so she is a remarkable woman, and I'm really excited to bring this episode to you. Thank you very much and enjoy listening. Hello. I am joined by Miss Melanie Dale, author and just an amazing person in general. I want to know, Melanie, first of all, what inspired you to talk about your infertility journey? And if you could tell us a little bit about your infertility journey as it stands now.
Hi, thanks for having me on the show. I went through infertility for like a 5-year battle, and then secondary for infertility after my first child. And so it was a major part of my life. And I decided to write In Freaking Fertility because I wanted the book that I wish I'd had when I was going through all of that. And I couldn't find a book like that. I wanted it to be not just a book about how to get me pregnant, but actually a book on like how to survive this experience with my identity intact and my relationships intact, and just kind of how to get through it. And so I decided to write that, and I convinced my husband to provide like a little blurb from his perspective for each chapter. And so it was just like a really neat project that we got to work on, just kind of going through some of the things that we found challenging through the whole thing. My journey, I have 3 kids, and 2 of them are adopted and 1 is through IVF. And so I'll just kind of unpack that for a second. I went through infertility for about 5 years before we had our son. He was a 6-day blastocyst. Day 6. So he was the only one that survived my womb after all of the many attempts. We did many rounds of IUI. I had multiple surgeries. I have endometriosis. And so just was really had a hard time getting pregnant. And we tried all kinds of different things. And so he was through IVF. And then after we had him, we tried IVF again. I had embryos in the freezer. And so we went back for those, and I was never able to get pregnant again. And my pregnancy with Elliot, my son, was high risk and challenging. And so I outlined a lot of our journey in infertility. So then after we had our son and then we weren't able to get pregnant again, then we turned to adoption. And so we adopted our youngest daughter from Ethiopia when she was 2. And we adopted our oldest daughter from Latvia when she was 9. And so our kids now are 16, 14, and 11. And we had them out of birth order. They're from 3 different continents. And have kind of experienced kind of the whole spectrum of building a family, infertility, secondary infertility, toddler adoption, older child adoption, international adoption. So we've kind of done it all. And I always thought I was going to go for one more kid, and I have no more bandwidth. 3, we're capping it off. Yeah.
I'm done. I'm tapped out.
Yeah. So I wrote the book, It's Not Fair. And the subtitle for that is Learning to Love the Life You Didn't Choose. And I talked quite a bit about our infertility journey within that. I also am a special needs mom, and went through a series of I call it label palooza, where we were just like, I was constantly in meetings with teachers and experts and doctors and specialists who were giving me labels for my kids. So It's Not Fair is kind of just a little bit about like when you think your life is going to look one way and then it ends up looking totally different than you thought it was going to look, so our journey to parenting looked a lot different. And then once we finally were able to become parents, it's looked different than what we thought, and just wrestling with all of that. And so I wrote that, It's Not Fair. And then I just continued to get feedback from people who wanted to know more about my infertility journey specifically. And so that's when I really decided to go for infrequent fertility. And it's illustrated, it's funny. I wanted, going through infertility is the most brutal thing I've been through. It's so hard. And I wanted people to be able to laugh in the midst of that hard stuff. And that's been such an important coping strategy for me. So I wanted it to be a book that was relatable, was helpful, was also funny, and a chance to just feel like you're sitting down with a friend going, this really sucks.
I love that so much. Okay, so full disclosure, I found infreaking fertility when we were going through prepping for our second frozen embryo transfer. So I have one spontaneous pregnancy, and I have one IVF baby, and one ovary. Just the lonely, just my little
lonely ovary.
Righty she's pulled a lot of weight in her time.
Oh wow, Righty for me likes to torture me. She stabs me over and over again.
Not cool, Righty.
Lefty's nicer to me, but good for you. Righty is doing double the work.
That's exactly. Yeah, she is pulling all the weight. Lefty had to go. Lefty was producing what we call a mucinous cystadenoma. So it was producing tumors about the size of large grapefruits. So, I mean, yeah, just a bad roommate. We didn't need her. We didn't need her at all.
Yeah, you got to get her out of there.
We had a spontaneous pregnancy. He is now 6 years old. And our IVF baby is now 3 years old. And I didn't find infreaking fertility when we were going through our first round, but back at the end of 2019, coming into 2020 is when I found infreaking fertility. And first of all, I love that you said that you talked about it from a man's perspective. So I love that you got your husband involved in it, because there's not a large community for men who are experiencing infertility, or even not even male factor infertility itself, which is a totally different beast, but just from a man's perspective, watching his wife or his partner go through this.
Right.
And so I love that you included that.
He was like my underwear holder for years. He would go with me to these things, and he was just in charge of my panties. He'd sit in the corner, hold the panties, wait for me to be done, watch some other man shove an ultrasound wand up in me,
Yes.
Definitely I was going through the most invasive part of it, but he, trying to figure out how to support me through all of that. And then also his own part. And so I'm really thankful that he agreed to be really vulnerable and open. And I figured, I've written 4 books now, and most of my audience are women, but a lot of times even if the women are nudging their husbands in bed and being like, let me read this section to you, I figured it would be helpful.
Yes. And I did read some sections to my husband. He is incredibly involved, but I'm a little bit of a control freak, totally admit. So I would go to all the appointments alone. I did all of my shots by myself.
You did?
Oh, yeah. And my husband was like, do you want me to? No, thank you. That's a hard pass. Appreciate it, but nope.
I think Alex actually enjoyed getting a little aggression out of me with those, every night. And see, we did this long ago. My IVF baby is my middle child. He's 14, so it's been a while, since we were doing this. And so this was before DVRs and where you could just actually record the television. So we were big Alias fans.
Oh, yes.
Anyone
Fabulous
remembers?
show.
Yeah, such an incredible Jennifer Garner. And so we had it timed, like we would do these injections like on commercial breaks of aliens. Like,
Yes.
ice the spot. And he would like jab it in while I'd sing 80s tunes at the top of my lungs. And then we'd like race back down so we didn't miss any of aliens.
What was your go-to 80s song? Just curious.
Oh, I know. I mean, Journey, Don't Stop Believing. That's a good
Classic.
one for the infertility journey, right?
That's right. I love it so much.
Maybe a little, I hate myself for loving you. I mean, let's be honest.
I mean, just a little bit of masochism. It's a healthy level of masochism, right? And we're going to talk a little bit more about the books because I definitely want to share my experience when I was reading them. A lot of your work is talking about your Christian faith and your relationship with a church and church members and God throughout your journey. So, and all of those things. So I'm really curious, like, what was your spiritual journey throughout infertility and kind of what made you want to incorporate that into the books?
Yeah, it's complicated. I hope my books are accessible for people of any faith or no faith. But I do, as a Christian, I bring that perspective to the table. And so I wanted to include it. And especially with infertility, I basically tried to shove it all in one chapter. So if somebody was like, I don't want that, you can skip that chapter. But a lot of us are either dealing with our own faith or we're dealing with maybe our family's faith, our friends' faith. You know, it hits us in some way or the other when we're going through something hard. And different people navigate that for better or for worse in our lives. And so with infertility for me, that was definitely a big part of my journey is both managing my own faith and encountering other people's faith in the process of us trying to get pregnant. And so people say all kinds of things, you know, whether, you know, you just have to have faith. And it's like, well, you know, I'm so glad that worked for you, but just having faith doesn't seem to be working.
Right.
And so, you know, then people want to make you like totally question your faith. I'm like, that's not the way it works. So I definitely wanted to open up and be honest about our journey. One thing that I noticed in the faith community that I was in at the time was a lot of people, when they hear that we were struggling, or I would express that this is really hard and it sucks, people would want to give me like a pep talk.
Yes.
You know what? I don't need that. Like, I'm allowed to say, I don't like this. Like, I believe in God. I don't like his timing on this plan. You know, I don't like what's happening now. And I feel like that's okay to be honest about that, but I don't need a pep talk to remember to keep believing.
Right.
I think in some ways, having faith through the process helped me for sure, because I could cry to God and I could talk to God. I always joke that I have a swear shed. I don't really have like a swear closet, you know, like I have a swear shed. Like we're just going to like balls out scream when we need to, because I feel like you can handle that. I think in other ways, just being in a faith community, you can meet those people who are so wonderful and they're perfect and they just kind of be with you in your pain, but then you can also meet people who keep trying to fix it. And that can be really challenging.
So I was raised Catholic, and Catholicism has some very strong opinions about in vitro. Really any medical intervention for conception. I'm not a practicing Catholic now. I attend a non-denominational church that I love very much, but that was very heavily seeped into me as I was growing up. And like there's no goalie in Catholicism. There's no condoms, there's no birth control, things like that. It wasn't an incredibly excruciating experience trying to peel that belief system away, but I was very acutely aware that there are people out there who really do struggle with the morality of IVF. My husband in particular, rightly so, really questioned, like, is this God's way of telling us that we should no longer pursue children? You know, at first it was, we already have a healthy child. Is this God's way of telling us that we only have one? When we experienced our failed transfer last year, the question was, okay, is again God telling us that we don't need to continue this, even though it was within our heart's desires to work through it? And so there is for me and for several of my clients that have experienced this, there is a huge tug of war between like our heart's desires and how we interpret our faith and how we interpret what God's plan is. And so to hear you really address some of that, along with some of the, I'll just say it, the idiotic statements that people make. I love that you said like a pep talk to like keep believing. There is still an element of fear is the absence of faith. And I think can be very detrimental to those of us who are experiencing infertility, because it kind of discounts that fear is actually a normal biological response from our brain.
Absolutely. And I know plenty of people who get pregnant easily who have fear. Like that's
Right.
Just, so to put that burden on infertile couple, that's not fair at all. It's funny, there are certain memories that just are so painful sometimes. We were involved in a couples group at our church. And we had some leaders in there. And I remember being in that room. We went through all of our infertility process. We were trying to figure out what we thought about IVF. Honestly, when we started the process, and again, this was a long time ago, we just didn't have enough information. I love science, and I didn't understand how it worked. And so when I had people in my faith community being like, that's bad, I was like, I need to learn more about the science. Why is it bad? And so I do think for couples, you have to kind of take what you learn about the science and what you believe with your faith, and then kind of figure out where is your decision within that. And so for us, the more we learned about the science, the more comfortable we felt making the decision to pursue IVF, to realize we feel very comfortable doing this and pursuing this, and we feel like this is very much within our faith journey and totally fine. So that gave us the confidence, even when people questioned that, to be like, no, we've done the research and we feel really good about this choice. But it is hard when you feel judgment from other people who have made a different choice or disagree with that. And I still, when people have that kind of judgy tinge in their voice about IVF, I feel very stabby about it. And I look at my son and I'm like, oh, he's just such a joy. And I'm so thankful I didn't listen to other people telling me how to pursue fertility. I'm so thankful for that. But I remember we were involved in this group, and there was a leader in the group. And I reached out. I tried to talk to them during our process as we were trying to figure all of this out. And we, Alex and I were leading at this group. My belly was in a second trimester. I was wearing maternity clothes. I was pregnant, and I was serving in this group. And this leader got up and started talking about how IVF was wrong. And how it was bad, and how putting embryos in the freezer was wrong. Here I am pregnant with our IVF baby, and we have freezer babies waiting for us for the next round. And we're leaders in this church program. And to hear that from the stage, it still just felt like a punch in the gut. And I'll never forget that. And I had to just remind myself, that's where she's landed on that, but that has nothing to do with what I believe. Yes. And but I think it is challenging for those of us in a faith community, when you feel that judgment from people who you respect and you care about, can be very painful.
Yes.
I felt that pain too.
And that's some of the work that I do with my clients, is because that type of judgment doesn't just come within a faith community. It can come from literally anyone. And so helping people to kind of divorce themselves from other people's opinions.
You have to do what's right for you. It's about you and your partner figuring it out together. What do you feel comfortable? What works for your faith and your finances and what you can handle physically and your relationship. It's a personal decision that happens for each couple.
Yeah. And people are always going to have opinions. That's part of just being human. They could have easily as strong an opinion about water as they do about IVF.
Even with adoptions, we had people with very strong opinions about both of our adoptions as well. So honestly, it's building your family. People are just going to have opinions, Yes. And so I have friends who have 6 children. Well, people had opinions about that. I have people who have 1 child. People have opinions about that. So honestly, we just have to stop listening to dickheads.
Yes. People are going to say some stupid shit in their lives, and mostly to other people. And it doesn't have anything to do with you. It has everything to do with them and their experience and their belief in the world. And people are just going to say some shit. I have an entire holiday episode that talks about how do you navigate the idiotic comments from drunk Aunt Mary who just starts talking about stuff.
That's such a good episode. What a great resource, because we all have to.
Yes. It literally can be anyone, because anyone will share anything. If it comes out into their brain, they'll probably spit it out in their mouth.
Yeah. And then if you're able to have any children, then they're opinionated about those kids. So it never goes away.
No, it just changes depending on your circumstance. Yeah. Okay. So it's not fair in freaking fertility. So, in freaking fertility was the way I found you, right? I found you just searching fertility books on Amazon. I think it's required reading for anyone who's going through infertility. And again, faith is only an example in one chapter, but the relatable and personable elements of this book are incredible. It literally is like you're talking to your best friend who's also going through it. And you're like, oh my God, that's so true.
Because it's, people don't talk about it. And so I was like, when I would find someone who would actually talk with me about this subject, it really was just like pour a glass of wine, sit together and just have an evening of like letting it all out. And so I know not everyone has people in their lives that talk about this. So like, I want to be your person. I'll talk to you. And it's illustrated. I had so much fun illustrating it with like sperm rocket ships and whimsical ovaries.
Yes. There are so many examples. I was like, this is a goddess of alliteration is what's happening. You paint with words, my friend. You paint with words.
Oh, thank you.
So In Freaking Fertility was how I found you. I fell in love with you and your work in It's Not Fair. Mm-hmm. The linchpin for me with It's Not Fair, and I'm not anybody's going to see this, so I'm holding it up for you. It's your own book. I don't know why I did that, but...
Here. Oh, wait, I put mine here too since I knew we were going to talk. So book twinsies.
Boom, right there. It's Not Fair. It was a quote that you talked about how people will always say, God won't bring you to it unless he can bring you through it, right? And that's kind of a misappropriated term that people talk about with trials and tribulation, but it actually has more to do with temptation. And when you talked about that, I was like, holy shit.
Like, oh, God won't give you more than you can handle. Oh,
that one.
That's actually, no.
So inaccurate. But it is.
Must be amazing. Look how much he's given us to handle. Oh my gosh.
He must think that we are the next kings and queens. It's incredible. It was literally in that moment where it started to shift for me because I was so angry at God. And my faith had been split. What I perceived to be my faith had split so much just in our experience with primary infertility, which was probably about 2.5 years until my son was actually born, that it was like I had walked away from God, from the church. I didn't want any conversation to lead back to faith because I was so apart from it.
I had to take a break too. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yes. And it was for the first time I had seen, because then we always go into judgment about ourselves. If we have any sort of faith community, we're always judging ourselves for not doing enough, not being a part of the community enough, things like that. When I was reading your book, it was like for the first time someone was like, yeah, it's totally reasonable to take a break based on your faith. It's totally reasonable to question your faith, that God doesn't mind it. And I think that was a game changer for me that would like, God doesn't mind that you question him. He welcomes questions. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. I mean, in my reading of scripture, I see people who question all the time. And they're in there. They didn't the Bible writers didn't edit that stuff out. It's in there for us to find and to resonate with. And so when I read the Psalms, I see King David, he's an emotional wreck,
Yes.
He's Psalm 6, he's soaking multiple pieces of furniture with his tears. He's all night long, I flood my bed with weeping and drench my couch with tears. I'm like, wow, that is a lot of crying. I hope he's hydrating.
Super emotional.
So emotional that, he's crying out with anguish. He's like, how long, Lord? How long? Psalm 6, Psalm 13, he's constantly how long? How long am I going to feel this way? How long am I going to battle with this? And so I think it's okay. And but he always comes around to the Lord has heard. I trust the Lord, so you see the whole journey there of him just letting God have it and then being like, I do trust you. So what I learned through all of that was that it's okay to have those very real, raw conversations with God. And that doesn't damage your faith. And in fact, the Bible calls King David the man after God's own heart.
Yes.
So I'm like, not only does it not hurt our faith, it actually strengthens our relationship with God, which when I think about my human relationships are strengthened when we go through hard things and we're honest about them together. My marriage is better when my husband and I are honest. My close girlfriends, when we really get in there with that nitty gritty emotion, we are stronger on the other side of it. And so I definitely see that in the Bible when I read it. And so I think that, we have permission to do that. And I talk about this in the book, but a lot of people want to tell you, just trust God, just trust God.
Right.
And honestly, I can't force myself to trust anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Force yourself to trust someone, much less God, who you can't see in the physical flesh, it's, and so I started going, okay, when I would struggle with trust, I'm struggling. Like, I'm not trusting you because things are not happening in my timing. Things are not happening the way I want them to, or the way I think is best. And so I can't trust you. Help me to trust you. So I think, rather than being like pretending with God and being like, okay, I'm trusting you. I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to try to trust you so hard and just work through it. I think instead, let's be honest with God and go, listen, I'm not trusting you very well right now. Help me to trust you. And I think that is a prayer he will answer, because he wants us to trust him. Well, he can help us.
Right.
And so that is the prayer that I prayed. And I pray even now, help me to trust you. And in the New Testament, I see that in Mark, the book of Mark, chapter 9, there's that dad with the sick kid.
Yes.
He says, I believe, help me in my unbelief.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for those of us of faith, when we are struggling to believe, we can ask for help.
Yes.
We don't have to just soldier through and pretend with God. Because he knows, he knows
right.
we're struggling. Like, might as well be honest about it. And that helps me with my honesty. Sometimes I'll feel a tension and I'll feel a tension and I'll feel a tension. And then I'll be just driving in my car by myself and kind of just start talking to God, which usually ends up screaming at God for me. And I will say out loud, I am struggling with trusting you, or I am struggling with believing you. I'm struggling with where you are in all of this. Help me. And usually once I get to that point, I feel better. And,
yes.
I feel like that's a prayer healing answer. So anyway, that's been a big help for me. It was a big help for me through infertility. It's been a big help for me through our adoption processes. And now as we're parenting kids who have a lot of challenges, it is continuing to be a kind of a big theme for me in the faith department.
Yes, I absolutely love that there is just this realism. And you're absolutely right, because if you're raised in a faith community, there is this kind of aversion to telling God, I'm angry with you, I'm frustrated, I can't trust you, or I don't feel like I can trust you, right? So it's just like the elephant in any room. Until you acknowledge it, it just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And so actually saying the words, it is also a comfort for me. What I found to be hugely comfortable was the 3 parables in Luke 15. And not from the literal sense, but God is okay with however you come back. If you find yourself again, if you wander off, if you're outright obstinate, which is typically my case, if we're being honest, I am absolutely the prodigal son who will just outright disobey. But that there is still love there no matter what that journey that brings you back to him. And that was a huge revelation for me in understanding that I do believe that God comes to me through kind of prophetic dreams, usually because I'm shutting up long enough to actually listen to him and not argue with him. That's typically my problem. But that my entire experience was it was almost as if you gave me permission to question my faith, even though the permission has always been there and God has always given us permission. It was like seeing it in writing from someone who's experienced the similar journey that we have. And it was like, yeah, it's like your best friend looking at you like, yeah, that does suck. And it's okay. And so that was what really changed for me when I read It's Not Fair. I was like, oh, so I'm not a complete a-hole of a faith person because I'm saying, you kind of suck in this moment, God, a little bit.
My dad used to always say my shoulders are broad. I can take it is basically what he's saying. I can take it. My shoulders are broad. And I think if my dad's shoulders are broad, how much broader are God's shoulders?
Right.
And he can, I think he can handle the full breadth of our emotions and the full breadth of our doubt and our struggling. And he wants to be in relationship with us, which still is mind blowing to me. Why? But yes, he does. And so I think that when we're honest with him, we're going to be led into deeper, stronger relationship with him ultimately, rather than pretending that everything's okay.
Yes.
It's
so
true
good.
It's true in our human relationships. I think it's true in our relationship with God as well. It certainly has been for me.
I mean, it has to be.
I start to feel that hardened heart where I'm just like, I'm so done with this. But I honestly think it's not because of God. I think it's because of some Christians. Because it's that chin up and everything is fine. And yay, we go to church and we'll pretend like everything is awesome. And no one wants to hear when there's no bow at the end. And with infertility, that is very challenging because it's month in, month out, loss after loss after loss. And people want to be there for the big celebration at the end. But what if there is no celebration? Or what if the celebration is a long time coming? And so we have to learn to be okay with no bow at the end of the story. And like, is God enough, even if there's no bow?
Yes.
Those are the hard questions I ask and I talk about, and it's not fair. Those are the hard questions that I've had to deal with in life that, what if there's no bow? And for a lot of us, there's not really a bow. Or maybe there's a bow, but then it gets ripped off and smashed.
Yeah.
Our stories are messy, either for people who have never experienced that or for people who maybe haven't experienced it yet. That can be challenging to be in a relationship with those people because some of us are living messy lives and our faith is messy. And I think that's okay.
Yes. And I think it is a little bit of a misnomer that there is some sort of destination, like there's some magic switch that's flipped when you finally get your baby that you don't automatically like talk to yourself like an asshole all the time, which is a lot of what I work on. And so I think you're absolutely right there. For anyone who is experiencing infertility, that be messy and that be okay. And anyone who's walking an infertility journey with someone that they love, being comfortable with being uncomfortable with someone else's emotions is just like one of the greatest gifts that you can give someone. When I was working on my master's in social work, I read a book called The Art of the Healing Presence. It's such a fast read, but it's really just about embracing silence and stillness when you're with someone who needs that. And not try for the pep talks, not try for the toxic positivity or cliches or platitudes, because they often don't serve the purpose for which the person is trying to meet.
In the middle of It's Not Fair, I actually have a chapter called something like 100 Ways to Help Someone.
Yes.
And it's just literally a list of 100 ways to like come alongside someone who is struggling. And not everything on the list is going to appeal to everyone. Like there's some things that I would never want on that list, and there's some things that I definitely would want, but I do think there's so many ways to come alongside without having to like try to give someone a pep talk or try to fix it.
Yes.
Sometimes we just can't fix it. And you're right. It's just about presence and like what kind of presence in someone's life is going to help them. Maybe it's just giving them a fuzzy blanket to wrap up in.
That was what your mom gave you, right?
Yeah, I have a fuzzy blanket, and I now a lot of times I give fuzzy blankets when people are going through something. So, like if I go somewhere and I see that there's a sale on fuzzy blankets, I just buy several of them. And if somebody's going through something, I have a fuzzy blanket ready.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what you're currently working on. I know you just is the book released now? Calm the Heck Down?
Calm the Heck Down came out in December. Before we pivot, can I give you guys, there's an acronym I want to share.
Yes.
When I've gone and spoken places, it's an acronym that I usually talk about like when I'm talking. But it's helpful to me, and I wanted to give that as just a resource for anyone who's struggling right now, if you're going through IVF or whatever it is you're going with. But I have an acronym that's CLIFF. So like when you feel like you're dangling off of a cliff, and when I think of cliff dangling, I think of the man in black from Princess Bride.
Yes, obviously.
Hanging on that cliff and just trying to get up that cliff, right? Okay, so CLIFF. And CLIFF stands for Count the Wins. So especially when you're going through infertility stuff, it's hard to, like, you don't want to celebrate because you're so afraid. You're like waiting for the other two to go. And so sometimes maybe you want to just be on pins and needles, but sometimes it's okay to just count the win, whatever it is, and let yourself experience joy even in the middle of the waiting.
Yes.
So count the wins. Count the wins. That's C. L is laugh to keep from crying, and so laughter is a huge coping mechanism. It's why I like to write about hard things with humor, and so because I just think humor is such an important tactic for us. Crying's great too. Lots of crying. I cried over the weekend, but laugh is good too. Okay, so count the wins, laugh to keep from crying. The I stands for identify the grace bearers. And that's those are the people we've been talking about, like the people who give us grace, who just kind of walk with us. They don't try to solve it. They don't try to fix it. So identify the grace bearers. Those are your safe people. And then the first F is find professional help, which that can be your amazing doctors and your team around you trying to help you with your fertility. That can also be your therapist, very important person, whoever that is. But find professional help. Get yourself a team, a support network that you have. Maybe there's a pastor or somebody in your life. Just make sure you've got that team around you. So find professional help. And then the last one is fall apart with God. And we talked about that, of it being okay for him to just fall apart, experience all the emotions, go to your swear shed, whatever that looks like. But that acronym is just kind of some of the tools we talked about today. And I just wanted to share that as like, I like acronyms because I remember them when I'm in the middle of a full scale meltdown. I'll be like, okay, what's an acronym?
I love that. So good. For professionals, I would be remiss if coaching is an incredibly effective tool for going through this experience, not just because I am one, but not everyone is in need of therapy. Some people are what in social work we would call subclinical. So they don't have any problem functioning in their day-to-day lives, but they do know that they don't want to feel this way. But I absolutely agree with you. Therapy, your medical team, anything like that. I love that acronym so much. I'm gonna make sure to include that in the episode promotional stuff.
Awesome. I put it in like a meme on Instagram at some point, but it's probably been a couple of years. It's probably buried. I need to probably bring it back out and repost it. Sometimes when I'm feeling floofy, I kind of go, wait, which one do I need right now? I identify the gray hairs. I need to call someone. So yeah. And help with me. Okay, so what I'm working on now, Emily. So Calm the Heck Down, my 4th book, just came out in December. It is a parenting book. So yes, I wrote an infertility book, and then I followed that up with a parenting book. And I always tell people, like, if you're going through infertility and you just cannot listen to people talk about parenting right now, you do not have to follow me on Instagram. You do not have to listen to me talk about parenting. Those are two very different things. I am a parent. I'm really honest about that. I have 3 whole teenagers up in my house. And so, yeah, Calm the Heck Down, though, is how to let go and lighten up about parenting, which was a very important thing for me to learn after going through infertility and adoption, because I do think I had the tendency to not be calm. I wanted to, like, now, okay, I've managed to get these children in my home, and now I want to, just hold on to them and like make sure nothing bad happens. And so over the years now of parenting these kids, I have had to learn how to calm down in order to survive as hard things have hit us, as we've experienced more and more expectations kind of falling. I've had to figure out how to calm down in the middle of all and lighten up. And so it's a funny parenting book. It has some of our great stories from the archives in my parenting journey. And it was really fun to write. It has all my tips and tactics for just how to calm the heck down. So that came out in December. And I'm in the middle of this year, what did you do on quarantine? I actually pivoted to fiction. I wrote my first novel. It's a YA novel. So I'm getting ready to send it to my agent. So I'm like nervous about it. I hope it all turns out okay. But that was really fun to write. I've written some episodes of Creepshow, which is a TV show on Shudder. I like horror. It's probably all the knives and needles that I've been stuck with from IVF.
It is. It's subliminal messaging that you've received over years and years and years.
I'm incredibly comfortable with slashers because of my experience. No, anyway, I have an episode of Creepshow coming out in April that I'm really excited about. It's one of my favorite things I've written, so that'll be really fun.
Nice. I didn't know you had started going into the fiction realm. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, I've been a writer most of my life, and I'm excited to get to keep trying new projects and doing new things. So, yeah.
So good. I will link all of your books in the show notes. Is there one last tidbit, if we could boil down everything that we talked about, no pressure at all? I see your eyes just got really big. 40 minutes worth of content. Let's boil it down. No, but what is one good takeaway that you could give? Cliff is obviously an amazing takeaway, an amazing acronym for helping you navigate that process. But is there anything else that you would like to add for the audience?
Cliff is such an important resource for me. And I would just say, be gentle with yourself. I think a lot of us can kind of be masochists. And we're used to stabbing ourselves with needles a lot. And I definitely struggled a lot through infertility. I struggled with depression. I struggled with beating myself up a lot. It's, you go through those times of feeling like this is my fault. I can't, and just being so frustrated that you can't like manifest this. And then when you add on everybody saying things that add more pressure to you, it can be so challenging. So I would just say be gentle with yourself and give yourself grace. Give yourself so much grace going through it. This is not your fault. What you're going through, it's just a thing that you're going through. And I think more than anything, I want people to go through it no matter what happens and no matter what the journey looks like. I want people to come out on the other side with their identity intact, with their self-worth intact, that you matter and you're important and you're beautiful and you're whole. And so, I mean, that's one of the things that I really talked about toward the end of infrequent fertility, of just this feeling of wholeness that I want us to have, regardless of what happens with our bodies. That we, whether we can create a child in our womb or whether we, no matter what happens, that we would recognize that we're whole and that we're valuable, no matter what.
That echoes everything that I talk about on this podcast, because I will typically coach or teach a coaching concept. And the first takeaway for that coaching concept is always compassion. People will call it grace, people call it compassion. But I do believe that the conversation that you have with yourself is the most important conversation to pay attention to, because it influences literally everything in your life.
Yes.
So I love that so much. Okay. Thank you very much for your time. I know that there is someone out there who's been questioning their faith and is judging the hell out of themselves for it. So just, this is your permission slip. It is absolutely fine. And just thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh my gosh. Thanks for having me. Yeah. Question your faith. Talk to God about it. I feel like, he wants to talk about your faith. So just have that conversation.
Love it so much. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of IVF This. If you like what you've heard, click subscribe and follow to make sure you don't miss an episode. And if you want to learn more, head over to www.ivfthiscoaching.com to learn how to work together.